Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on the Pro Cloud Security System. My name is Brad, and I'll be hosting a demonstration today. If you have questions during the webinar, feel free to enter them into the questions pane on your GoToWebinar panel. If the question is outside of the scope of today's discussion, please email them to support@designmanager.com. Lastly, if you miss a portion of the webinar or want to review any of our past discussions, go to our YouTube channel at Design Manager Inc., Design Manager INC. And here you can see a complete listing of all sorts of topics, including quick start videos, short helpful tutorials, and our comprehensive webinars, which we categorize into our project management courses, accounting courses, and all of our other weekly webinars as well. In this week's discussion, we will be talking about granting and restricting access to various functionality in Pro Cloud using the password attribute system on the passwords window in Pro Cloud. Now, security settings in Pro Cloud really begin right when the user invitation is created for a new team member using the account management portal. Jump over to our Pro Cloud. You can easily access the account management portal by clicking File in the top left corner and then selecting Account Management Portal. This will bring you to our Account Management Portal login page, which you can enter with using your Pro Cloud username and password. Mine's stored in the browser for ease of use. Click Login, and that brings us to our Account Management Portal. Now, as many of you know, here you can easily add new users, disable past users, even set a particular user as an account manager, which allows them to get to the account management portal. You can even send password reset requests as well. When you add a new user, let's do so, you're asked to select a user security scheme. To set the Pro Cloud security settings for the new user based upon their role within the team. Now, you can hover your cursor over the information indicator and it'll define all the various security schemes for you, but here are the basic definitions. Administrator has access to any and all functions in Pro Cloud, able to get everywhere. Designer, they can create new projects, they can input specifications, of course, create proposals, but not purchase orders. They can reprint client invoices, but have access to very little other accounting functions. Purchasers, they can also create projects and input items and components. They can make or edit purchase orders, but not proposals. And they also have access to certain accounts payable functions. Bookkeepers, they can access all reports, any function in accounts receivable, accounts payable, and general ledger, but they can't add, edit, or delete proposals or purchase orders. And lastly, design assistant. They can view but not create or edit projects. They can also input specifications and create proposals, but not generate purchase orders. And access to any other accounting function, of course, is going to be prevented for them. Now, as I said, these schemes configure account permissions for given team roles based upon our experience. They can obviously be changed to suit your team members' needs, and doing so is going to be the next and much larger portion of our discussion. For more information on the Account Management Portal, see our short webinar on our YouTube channel titled, well, Account Management Portal Webinar. As I said, the user security system in Pro Cloud is located on the company information window, which we access by clicking File, Company Information and Settings. On our company information window, we're going to go to our Users and Security tab. And here we can see an entry for each of our cloud user accounts, even ones that have been disabled in the past, such as these test accounts. Now, that leads us to the concept of status. Any historical account has already been disabled, or it could even have been converted from a prior iteration of Design Manager Pro. Active accounts are live user accounts, while an active manager is also a live Pro Cloud account that does have the ability to access the account management portal. Speaking of the account management portal, we also conveniently have a button to access the page from here as well, so you can very quickly add a user, disable, etc. Now, let's dive a bit deeper and take a look at some of the information available on the password window itself. Remember that most changes to information on this window will only take effect after the user has logged out and back in again. So what do we have here on my personal demonstration account, which is an admin account? First, we can see the username that is fixed and immutable. That's the name of the account itself. The full name, my name, it can be your actual name, as in this case, or something more generic like accounting, bookkeeper, design intern, something along those lines. Now that name is linked to the account, obviously, and that's further linked to any accounting transactions that will be displayed on windows like your transaction search or reports like your transaction register, etc. Further, it's really linked to any activity that may occur for that particular user in Design Manager. If you look at your user activity log, you can see all the functions I've already done today from that window. So that's where that name is derived from and how it's displayed throughout the program. The user title is optional. Employee. You can optionally assign a employee code with a particular user account. And this is very convenient when you're entering in your time billing, as that will be the default employee automatically input for me when I'm entering in my time entries manually. Account manager, we just discussed whether or not I can access the account management portal. Then we have two emails. We have our correspondence email. This is the employee or the user's email address used for sending documents via email from within Pro Cloud, while the account management email is used here for notification of activity from the account management portal, such as password resets, etc. And you can see mine are both the same because I am an account management manager, so I am going to be alerted to any of those types of activities, while our designer example, they have their own email address, yet all of those notifications still go to myself. Lastly, we have the copy from function. Now, you can use one user account as a, let's call it template, for other accounts in the future for employees that are going to have similar responsibilities. So really, you can create a brand new user through your account management portal using one of the security schemes. Then you can adjust it or configure it to your needs and your liking, and then copy that customized set of password attributes to any new team member that has the same functions in the future. So you don't have to individually configure it each time. Now, let's get down to the real core of the password permission system, which is controlled by our attribute, let's call it tree. And when a cloud user logs in and runs Pro Cloud, all of these proper permissions are automatically applied for that user account. And that's how the entire system functions. Before reviewing the plethora of these security settings, let's use our designer account here to illustrate the concept of function accessibility. Remember, the designer's security scheme can create new projects, they can input specifications, create proposals, but not POs, though they can reprint purchase orders, they can reprint client invoices, and have very limited other accounting functions. So how does that actually appear throughout when the designer is using that particular security settings? So let's jump over to I have another Pro Cloud up and running as I'm logged in under our designer account, as you can see along the bottom toolbar. And here, let's just display how those granting and restricting of access would appear to them. So they can get into their projects as we saw, they can certainly add, they could edit existing ones, etc. Same with specifications. Certainly the designer would be able to edit items, make new ones, all the functions that we would imagine. And we said they have full functionality on proposals as well. So again, they could create new proposals and those types of functions. Yet purchase orders, they can review purchase orders. They could even reprint one if so desired, but they can't create one. This is how the restriction of access is going to appear. They're going to have this access denied warning that's going to arise, which they simply acknowledge by clicking OK. And the same with some of the accounting functions, as we mentioned. So they can get to the client invoice window. They're prevented entirely from accessing the new tab on that window, so they can't create invoices, but they have the ability to easily reprint one if so desired. So that's how the system displays when a user is going to be prevented from accessing a various functionality throughout the program. And we'll see that time and time again as we explore all of the attributes in great detail. Now, speaking of which, one of the most common security changes that we do see from our standard set of security schemes is providing the designers the ability to create purchase orders. So let's figure out and demonstrate how to do so. I'm going to jump back onto my demonstration administrator account, and we'll go ahead and edit our designer user account. And what we'll see here is all of our various attributes listed for us. Now, a quick word on permission theory before we go ahead and grant them access to purchase orders. In general, it's always best to restrict access for users and then grant as necessary in order for the user to perform their duties. Doing so keeps all sensitive information secure from junior employees and even prevents more senior team members from inadvertently affecting information in an area where they're just not familiar. So we can see that all of our attributes are arranged, as I said, in this tree structure. And each relevant attribute will be listed under subsequent various legs or branches of the trees. And in general, the arrangement follows the main areas in ProCloud. So we can see we have a branch for file, which is going to be all of our file menu items. A branch for project, where we can see all of our project areas, projects themselves, specifications, employee time, proposals. Same with accounts receivable. Over on our accounting side, we have all of our accounts receivable functions in our accounts receivable frame, and we can see the same set of attributes there. So basically, the attribute tree really follows the same overall layout as the program in and of itself. Okay, how do you grant or restrict access? So let's go back to granting access to creating purchase orders and editing purchase orders for our designer. Now, I know that purchase orders are under the project tab, so I'm going to logically go under that branch, and lo and behold, there's purchase orders. I'm going to expand the view access, and we can see immediately there's the red lock of restriction. So if I want to grant access, I simply double click on each of them, and we can see that the red lock goes over to a gold lock, allowing access. Remember, once I save this, which I'll do so, now our designer would have to log out of ProCloud if they're currently in, log back in, and then those changes will be applied. Further, let's take a look at an area such as the general ledger, which our designer has completely blocked out. We just demonstrated how we can set very individual attributes one by one. Well, if I want to prevent a team member from getting into an entire area, I can just lock or unlock the entire view access for that branch, and then it's going to lock all of the other branches beneath. Same with unlocking just like that. So you don't have to go through each one individually, which of course would be a bit tedious. Okay, that's the very simple mechanism of truly granting and restricting access. Next, you're going to notice that many areas, let's take a look at accounts, have aspects or areas for add, editing, and deleting. We can see them on things like accounts or even greater functions like we saw under proposals or delivery tickets. The add, edit, delete scenario is common throughout many of the password attributes. And obviously, that's going to give us the ability to create or add, to update or edit, and delete or remove the particular entry respectively. Now, there may be a situation where a user needs to be able to review information, but not make any conceivable changes. Now, in the Design Manager terminology, we call this view-only mode, and here's how that can be configured. So we saw under our designer that they have the ability to add, edit, and delete items, and we saw how that operated just moments ago. And I just showed how under accounts, they are completely blocked. Everything from view access down has been locked. Now, let's contrast what we saw on the accounts to, let's go down under glossaries and down to vendors. View access is unlocked, yet add, edit, and delete are locked. So let's see how the difference in behavior is between the access of the chart of accounts versus the vendor payee glossary. So let's jump over to our Designer Pro Cloud, go to our accounting window, and if I attempt to access the chart of accounts, I'm immediately blocked because the view access on down has been locked. No access whatsoever. But the vendors, I can access. I can even view the information on the window. What I can't do is add or create new ones because add, edit, delete, of course, are all blocked. And even the edit, though I can view our particular vendor, I make some inadvertent changes in there, I go to click OK, I can't do so. I'm blocked here. So these changes that I made to the address are not going to be saved. That is what we call view only access. So I can see all the information. I simply can't create those types of entities or make any changes or of course delete them either. Okay. Back onto our main designer password once again. So let's get to the most interesting portion of the discussion today. What do all of these various attributes do? Now, we won't be able to get through or at least demonstrate all of them, but let's give it a shot. So we're going to go all the way to the top and begin on the file branch. First off, file, like I said, corresponds to the file menu. So we're going to begin with company information. Now, as you can imagine, the company information window has very sensitive information, accounting defaults, etc. So blocking that would certainly make sense. And further, you can individually block the ability, even if you can get to the company information, can you use the global update of projects and the global update of inventory? So you have two, let's call them sub attributes available there. The user setting windows, the designer has access there and can even change their name. Well, what does that mean? Back on our designer version, we can go to File and access our user setting window. Here, the user can customize certain information. They can change their correspondence emails. They can decide whether or not they want to show the to-do list at program startup. Do they want to show pictures of the thumbnails throughout the program, change the font, etc. And the sub attribute of allow name change could selectively grant me the ability to change my name. So if it's an individual, i.e. Brad Martin, great, you can change it. but perhaps I want my account to be generic like designer or internal, what have you. I may block that, so the name has to remain. The user activity log. Access by default is denied in this particular instance. Why? Well, as I showed before, the user activity log shows every single action occurred by any user in Design Manager, whether or not they opened the program, closed the program, added projects, edited items, those types of things. It really provides a transactional history of every activity that a particular user makes. Some companies will consider that to be a bit sensitive, so by default, in many of the user security schemes, that is blocked by default. Online payment settings are brand new online payment attributes. The designer by default can view that window as shown here, but can't make any changes. View access is desirable, of course, because we do want them to be able to access the brand new review and send window, which allows you to rapidly send your clients multiple proposals, invoices, etc., all in the click of a mouse, and allows them to submit payment as well. So by having view access by having view access opened, the ability to allow the designer to review the review and send window is granted to them. Okay. The import CIF and import CSV options. What those grant us ability to do is off the file menu, the user can go down to the import selection, and the import CIF allows them to bring in or import a file from specifying programs such as CAP or Giza, or there's a multitude of them, and very simply create specifications within a project from doing so. In the same vein, the import from file or import from CSV allows them to select an Excel file, CSV, text file, etc., and easily import clients, vendors, even the inventory immediately into Design Manager. Obviously, that's usually done at the onset of a company coming into ProCloud for the first few weeks. Finally, the access to the Design Manager Vision panel. I have full access here where I can see the to-do list and calendar. I can see all of the design information such as open purchase orders and open proposals, and I can even see my accounting activity as well. The designer, however, has accounting blocked or locked. So on their vision panel, clicking on the accounting tab is going to be denied. Yet they still have the ability to view the design information along with the calendar and timer as well. Okay, that gets us through file. Now into project. This is where the bulk of our discussion is going to be, because as you can see, we have lots of attribute branches, and each of those branches has lots of options as well. So let's go through these quickly, but in detail as well. So we can see that our design user security scheme has the ability to access projects and add and edit them, but not delete. So we can see that being true. As we saw the designer come over, they could create a new project, they could edit an existing project. But going to the defaults tab, the ability to use the update items to globally push changes to all items or a subset of items in a project is blocked, along with the access to the advanced markup or the project advanced options window, which has settings such as markup percentages, taxable defaults, those types of things are both blocked, as we can see on our attribute tree. They do have the ability to view the project status and reopen projects. So I could reopen a closed project, and I could get to the status window by selecting a project and clicking status and see all of the information there. Budgets for projects has its own set of attributes beneath it as well. So can the designer can access and view all the budget information and even make changes to those as well, which is shown on the budget tab. Oops. So we can see the ability to access the budget tab at all and even make changes to it as well. So since obviously budgets would be somewhat sensitive, the ability to even get to this tab can be blocked, and if they can get there, you can stop them from making changes as well. After projects, we get down to specifications, which has the most of our sub attributes available for us. So we already saw 2 or 3 times now that the designer could add, edit, and delete specifications, but store. What that indicates is, let's jump over to our specification window. The store attribute determines whether or not from the tree view can the user select an item that they use repeatedly and store it into the company catalog, which can then be used to import or bring into other projects in the future. Can change bypass WIP? What this refers to is whether or not the user can selectively force an item to skip the cost going into the work in process asset account directly into the cost of goods sold account associated with the item, or prevent it from occurring. Now, I have the ability to make that setting change. So if we look at the same item on our status tab, my bypass work in process option is enabled. I can make any changes there I would so desire. Our designer, however, same exact item, locked. They could see whether or not it's been that option's been selected or not selected, but can't make any changes themselves. Allow locked status change. If an item status has the password protected designation, a user with this attribute locked can't change that status manually. What do I mean by that? Okay. Back on our Designer Pro, the critical requires attention status is configured as password protected. So if I attempt to make a change to it, like drop that down to ordered, I'm going to get our access denied message. Quick add, can the user access the quick add window, where you can use this to very quickly or very rapidly enter in preliminary framework items, or you could also use this to, you can use this to enter in accessories, those types of things. Enter all of them in, and then you can transfer them right to the project. Speaking of transfer, the transfer function itself. Now, the transfer function actually has quite a bit of accounting activity associated with it. So that's going to determine whether or not the user can access the transfer function, which allows them to select an item that's been previously purchased and then move that item into inventory, or in fact to another existing project, and it will process all the necessary accounting transactions as well. So it makes sense to have that sensitive accounting information locked as well. Create a task, fairly self-explanatory. Can the user make a task or appointment associated with a particular item by clicking the Add Task button, and then having that associated with the project and item, and then will appear on our to-do list. The schedule. Can the user access the project schedule to see our nice visual representation of the timeline of the project and even associated tasks within the various phases of that project? Show costs. Now, what the show costs will do is it's going to determine whether or not the user will be able to see the entered cost of an item, or can they only see the price? Now, this only applies if we're using the discount pricing mode. So if show cost is locked, the window would be configured where I would see the unit list, extended list price, discount, etc., and the sell price, but not see any of the cost information. Same on the item window, the cost column would be hidden. And in fact, the pricing tab itself would be disabled, so I couldn't reach it, obviously, because the cost, markup, etc., are so prevalently displayed here. This does not work in the markup pricing model because we're literally marking up costs. So the cost is clearly not necessary in that pricing model. So it's only functions if we're using discount pricing. Mark complete warning. What this will do, when that attribute is locked, we can see our complete column along the right-hand side. Now, it could be easy to inadvertently click the complete button, which would then prevent the item from appearing on your new proposal window, new invoice window, etc. So if I have that attribute locked and I click the complete column, it's going to always warn me beforehand. Just another double check to ensure that I really want to do so. Finally, allow locked edits. If the item status in this case has the lock edits selection, I'm not going to be able to make any changes to that item if it has that particular status. Well, what does that mean? Now, I've changed the await client approval status to use the lock edits. So since I have that attribute locked and I'm attempting to make changes to my pillow, Design Manager is going to give me the deny access, saying that the current item status does not allow editing. So it's basically freezing me from making any changes in there, presumably so that one of my senior team members can review, etc. Okay. Phew, all the specification information, lots of handy features in there, and for some of you may have even got to see some features that you didn't know existed in Design Manager, but we even have passwords for those as well. Jump down to employee time, a bit more self-explanatory than some of the specifications attributes. We have, the designer has the ability to access the employee time window, of course, and then whether or not they could add, edit, or delete there. So we could see over on our designer login, I can get to the employee time window. I can see all of my various time entries. I could add, of course. I could edit ones that already exist and even delete. I do have some restrictions though. Show rate and cost. Now, when this is locked, if we look at my time entries, I can see columns for rates and costs listed throughout. But our designer who has that attribute locked does not see the rate or cost columns, nor even upon editing do they see the rate and cost listed on the time entry itself, just the number of hours that they worked. So this is hiding what the client would be billed for their rate and what the presumable hourly cost of the employee is as well. In line with that is the show all employee time. This is locked for the designer, but myself, I can see entries for designer one, for Grace, etc. As our designer login has that attribute locked, they only see information, if they go to all entries, from themselves. It's only showing the time entries of the employee code associated with their password window, basically preventing them from seeing how much their other teammates have been working, all of that information as well. Okay, import, wide open. So that gives the designer the ability to access Design Manager Pro Cloud's time entry import, which they could use Design Manager Pro's pre-configured Excel sheet where you can input your time, enter your time, then import into Design Manager, or you could even use your own files to import, Excel, CSV, etc. So they have access to that. Oh, wait, they don't. Well, why not? Yes, they have the import unlocked, but as a matter of functionality, the import window itself can't suppress rates and costs. It has to be displayed there. And further, any outside or independent file could certainly include that information as well. So it's almost as if you have the ability to import, you must have the ability to show rate and cost as well. So if either of those are blocked, you can't use the import function. So they both must be open, which is why I configured it in this manner. Okay. Employee time, moving on to proposals. Very simple. We can access the entire proposal window. We have the ability to add, edit, delete, and reprint, all very self-explanatory. Status. That gives us the ability to access our convenient and useful proposal status window, where I can view the subset of the items just on that proposal to see if they've been invoiced, if deposits been received, etc. And whether or not I have the ability to change a status for a proposal or even indicate it as inactive or complete. So I could come over, change the status of an entire proposal, which would then change all the items as well. And whether or not, if I want to designate the proposal as inactive or complete, all controlled by the allow status change attribute. Purchase orders, a bit more restrictive for our designer scheme. We can, usually it is, but we changed it earlier in the discussion to grant them full access so they can get to the purchase order window, add, edit, and delete those documents, reprint, batch email or faxing. That provides us the ability to access the legacy batch emailing and faxing system if the company still uses that. Component window order status. What that grants or restricts is on the component window itself. Let's get down to our first component for our bench. On the order status tab, we can see the edit order status button, which jumps us to the purchase order status window for the associated purchase order itself. That's what that attribute controls. And speaking of status, we give the ability to access the purchase order status window and whether or not changes can be made. So for our designer, they can not only get to the order status window by clicking the receive status button on the purchase order window, they could input changes here as well, acknowledgement, date, and number, and save those changes, as we can see right there. Delivery tickets, very similar to the purchase orders. Basically, whether or not the designer can access the delivery ticket system. So we can see that I can create delivery tickets to indicate shipping, etc. I could edit one, delete. We can even reprint as well. And there we go. So in that case, all the abilities and functions for the delivery ticket system controlled by those quick set of attributes there. And finally, for our project, we're down to our specification search. Now, a very powerful tool for those of you who know in Design Manager. You can easily track down any number of components that satisfy conditions that you want to review for profitability or order tracking, etc. So the ability to access that window can be granted or restricted, and the ability to print that information in case we don't want an individual taking sheets and sheets of profitability information with them. That's controlled, and that determines whether or not if the user can access the specification window by clicking the spec search as shown here. And as you can see, all this information for the satisfying components based upon the parameters that we select are displayed for us, but there's lots of profitability and sensitive information in here as well. So we could see where some team members may want to be restricted from that information and whether or not they could print it as well. Okay, that gets us through project. Now, all of the other ones will go a bit faster than that. So let's begin with some of the accounting functions, starting with our accounts receivable. The designer security scheme has the ability to access the accounts receivable functions as a whole, because under our client invoices, they have the ability. They can't create any invoices as we saw at the beginning of our demonstration, but they can reprint existing invoices, which would certainly make logical sense. So how does that appear for our designer? So now we're on our accounting tab, and again, logically, we're focusing on the functions in the accounts receivable frame. If they go to the client invoice window, they don't even have access to the new tab whatsoever, but they could easily reprint an invoice as we saw, and yet don't have the ability to access the more advanced functions like making an invoice adjustment, which could be used to write off an invoice for bad debt or some nominal over or under payments on the invoice, whether or not they can make a credit invoice or a credit memo, and the ability to update the invoice to change the layout or transaction description, or those types of functions are all blocked. Essentially, all they can do is invoice. So you can see, is reprint an invoice. So you can see how you can really hone the desired functionality on a per team member basis. They do have access to the point of sale system. So our designer can log in there, as we can see, go to the point of sale. They can log in and process any type of point of sale invoice that they may need to as necessary. If you have a little retail shop, etc. There's a few sub attributes as well. They're not forced to log in. If this is locked, then when that particular user logs into Design Manager, the point of sale window is the first one that comes up for them. They are allowed to make any register changes, as we can see here, and even access the cash drawer, change that. And they can access the view walk-in history as well. So if a client is a repeat retail client, may want to see what they've purchased in the past, they have the ability to access that as well. And then finally, in accounts receivable, we get down to cash receipts. Now, we might assume that this is totally blocked. It's not. They do have the ability to access that window, yet they can't make any new ones, and logically, they can't make a bank deposit or deposit slip transaction either. But they can get to the existing tab. So we can access the cash receipt window, but I can't access the new tab to create new cash receipts, nor can I get to the bank deposit, but I can view all of the existing transactions listed for me. So I can review if a client has indeed provided payment, or what check number a client sent us, or their method of payment, etc. What I can't do is edit such transactions, or certainly not void, etc., because I have those sub functions blocked out or restricted. Onto accounts payable, general ledger, we can see that our designer is completely blocked out from all of these functions. So reviewing those attributes with this particular account wouldn't make too much sense. So let's switch over to our bookkeeper, who does have full access to these functions, and we can use their logins to show what can and cannot be accessed. So this is our bookkeeper login as well. So under accounts payable, we have the ability to access the various functions in general, starting with the vendor invoices, where you're going to record your operating expenses, vendor deposits, vendor invoices, etc. And that's going to be broken on into the now familiar new and existing areas as well. With the new tab, can I create new entries? Under our accounts payable, bills and invoices, the bookkeeper certainly can make and enter new various payables from the vendors. They can also access the recurring operating expense window. What that will allow us to do is to access the recurring operating expenses, where I can easily bring in expenses that I pay on a very timely basis, monthly, etc., and bring those in for payment. And of course, the existing tab, I can get to all of those entries, and I can even edit and void as one would expect. So whether or not I can get to the existing tab, and then certainly whether or not I could edit an entry or even void it. Under checking. Now, checking is broken down into the variety of associated functions with checking functions, such as the ability to pay and print checks, whether or not we can access the checkbook, whether or not we can access the reconciliation under the checkbook, and the same with credit cards. Can we access the credit card register, and can we access the reconciliation of the credit cards themselves? So all of those can be individually granted or restricted. So we can see for our bookkeeper, they can access the pay invoices, print checks window, which also has an entire array of sub attributes as well, which correspond on our payments and check window to all the functions along the bottom. So we can see they have the ability to edit the amount they're going to pay for a particular vendor invoice or expense. Can they use the hand check wire transfer window to indicate a check was written manually or there's some sort of electronic payment? Can they actually print checks themselves? If there are a variety of invoices from the same vendor and credits, etc., whether or not they can use the offset to clear those credits out of there. Can they use the credit card function to indicate payment via a particular credit card? And the same with the online payment. Was there any type of automated or online payments as well? All of those correspond and can be selectively granted or restricted access for each one of them. The checkbook itself, can we access that window? And if we can we void and transfer? So that corresponds to the checkbook itself. Do I have the ability to void a check? And use the transfer function, which allows me to easily indicate the movement of funds between various banking institution accounts, which again can both be individually granted or restricted access. Hand in hand with the checkbook itself comes the ability to access our reconcile checking window. If I can access that window at all, and whether or not I can view the history of past reconciliations. So can I get to the reconciliation window? And if so, can I use the history function to reprint prior reconciliations for my records, or if the accountant needs them, etc. And that's nearly completely analogous to the credit card function. Can I access the credit card window? And if so, can I access the ability to reconcile the credit cards and view the history from the reconcile button on the credit card window to get to our reconcile credit card window itself and the history button, just like the checking window. General ledger. Okay. Underneath the view access, we immediately have two very interesting attributes. The first is the allow fiscal month changes. This determines if the bookkeeper, when entering in new transactions, can switch what fiscal month they desire to post those entries into. While the allow closed month posting is a bit different. This determines if the individual, even if they can't change the fiscal month when posting, can they edit a particular transaction and change the fiscal month when they notice an issue. So even though the current fiscal month is 06/2020, I want to fix this entry by bringing it back into 02 of 2020 as such. And that's determined by the second of the two attributes. Next, accounts. Obviously very sensitive. Do we have access to the chart of accounts? If so, can we add, edit, or delete? And can we selectively get to the balances function on the account window? So that's demonstrated on the general ledger frame, of course, under our accounts. Can I create an account? Can I edit an existing one? Can I delete one if appropriate? And what the balances attribute indicates is whether or not I can use the balances button to get to the account balances window to view that. So conceivably, an account user may be able to manage the accounts, create them, edit them, etc., but we still want to hide the actual balances from them as well. So we even get down to a degree of security all the way down to that level. Obviously, journal entries, fairly high accounting function. So can we access the journal entry window to create new ones? And very similar to our operating expenses, can we access the recurring journal entries as well if we do a monthly payroll or those types of things? So we can see our access to the journal entry window. On the new tab, can we create new ones? And can we get to the recurring journal entries as well? Same with the existing tab. Can I access all of my prior journal entries? And if I can I edit and void them? Very similar to our accounts payable operating expense window. So we could see any past journal entries and whether or not I could add, edit or void them. That brings us to our returns and credits. Now, actually, the returns and credits are broken out into two different windows, one for client returns and one for vendor credits. The client returns and credits is under the accounts receivable frame, and we can see the returns and credits window. And this gives us access to our very sophisticated client returns and credits, where I can very easily return a deposit to the client for an item or items, or a refund a retainer, or even refund an item that's been invoiced. Correspondingly, the vendor returns and credits is under the accounts payable frame, under that returns and credits button. And here we can process those transactions for refunds, credits, etc. from our vendors as well, both of which can be independently selectively granted access to. Finally, for general ledger is the transaction search. Do we have the ability to access the transaction search, which is very similar to our specification search, where I can see any subset of accounting transactions based upon the parameters that I input. And as you can imagine, all this information could be considered sensitive, since every transaction conceivably that I've entered into the application, and whether or not I could print this information as well, exactly like we had on our specification search in our project menu. That brings us to inventory. For those of you who do have an in-stock or in-house inventory, we have the ability to selectively grant access to the inventory functions. Starting with the stock item glossary itself, and we can see all of our inventory. And in the bookkeeper case, they can access that window as we just saw. They can add and edit inventory items, but they can't delete. So I could certainly create a new one. I could edit an existing one, but I'm prevented from deleting. Duplicate function. That allows us to select an inventory item that's very similar to a new one that I want to create. So if I don't want to re-enter all this precise information, I could use the duplicate. I've got all of my qualitative information entered in for me, and all I need to do is put a particular stock number associated with it. Basically a fancy and quick way of adding an item. Finally, the inventory adjustments themselves indicates whether or not the bookkeeper can create, change, or remove inventory adjustments. On the status adjustment tab, as indicated by the add, edit, and delete buttons, whether or not I could input inventory adjustments to manipulate the various quantities and cost of the item itself. The other portion of our inventory is our purchase orders. Just like projects have a purchase order system, so do inventory. So we can see if we have the ability to access the inventory purchase orders. In the case of the bookkeeper, they can't add, edit, or delete them. So we can access our inventory purchase orders, but we can't create, edit, nor delete, but we could certainly reprint. View only access, as we discussed at the beginning of our presentation. And we have the ability to access the legacy batch email faxing system and the receiving status window, the purchase order status window for our inventory purchase orders, just like our project purchase orders. Can I access that window, and can I make changes to it to update information about the order itself, receiving information, tracking information, etc. Finally, down to glossaries. Now, most of the glossaries have very standard add, edit, delete functionality, such as locations or clients. So they all function basically the same. We can deny access to an entire glossary, or we can provide the ability to view access only, where we do add, edit, and delete, etc. So all focus mainly on the particular glossaries that have some additional functions with them. First, let's start with the address book. Do we have access to the address book? Located on the project tab, address book. And what's going to happen here is we can see a multitude of different types of contacts, such as clients, vendors, employees, etc. So this window will adhere to whatever password attributes are set for that particular type of contact. So if I have the ability to add clients, I can do it from the address book. If I can't delete a client, I couldn't do it from the address book either. There are a few other functions associated with the address book. The Outlook Sync and Word Doc, that's actually a legacy system that's no longer relevant in the ProCloud environment, but we had the ability to export our list, which we could do so into Excel for mailings or those types of things. Can we create an email right from ProCloud address book? And the ability to print labels and envelopes here as well. So the address book ties in all of the attributes from the various contacts themselves and some additional functionality like the labels and exporting the contact list, etc. Employees have a few extra attributes: time, payroll, and point of sale. What those do on an employee glossary is selectively grant the ability to view the time tab, where we'd see the individual's rate, cost if entered, and any time exceptions as well. The payroll, if we're recording payroll entries in Design Manager, we would see that information, which of course could be sensitive, and all of the information on the point of sale showroom tab as well, which could display the sensitive commission information, etc. So all of those can be individually blocked as necessary. Miscellaneous contacts. This gives you the ability to create, back on the address book, when adding a new contact, there is the ability to create a miscellaneous contact. This is not a contact like a client or an employee or a vendor. This could be a restaurant, a lead, something along those lines. So that can be the ability to do so can be independently controlled under the miscellaneous contacts attribute. Finally, under the vendors, there's the ability to access the status window. So we saw before the project status, vendors have one as well. So we can see if the user can access the status window for a particular vendor to see overall information about the history of the vendor, transactional information, etc. Again, could be considered sensitive in certain cases. Okay, now, finally, tail end, reports. I said at the beginning that bookkeepers in general have access to all reporting. So this would not be a good example to view the ability to grant or restrict access to a particular user since they do have full access. Our designer, however, does not have the ability to access all of those reports. In fact, reports for general ledger, accounts payable, etc., are all restricted. So when the designer logs in and they go to their report window, they don't even see report selections for accounts receivable, for accounts receivable, accounts payable, and general ledger. Not even an option on their report tree. Further, under project management, they have the ability to view most reports, but a sensitive accounting report such as the profit and loss by project summary is blocked, restricted. So on their report tree, they don't even see the option for that report. Like it doesn't even exist for them. So the reports work a bit different. They can't click on it and get access denied. It just doesn't even appear as an option for them. So you can see you can grant or restrict access to all genres or types of reports, and then even in the subcategories, restrict individual ones as well. Very sophisticated access there. Finally, that gets us down to the API clients. Essentially, what this means is, can the user access our supporting programs for Design Manager, like our iPhone app or our product clipper for our Chrome extension, and anything else the team members are going to develop in the near future can be controlled by that singular view access option there as well. And with that, that brings us to the end of our lengthy discussion on security attributes in Design Manager Pro Cloud. We tried to review the security, the pre-configured security schemes when adding users from the account management portal. Briefly discussed on some of the best practices when it comes to granting permissions in general. And then we fully explored the password window and all the possible attributes available in your Pro Cloud. I try to pay particular attention to some of the less known features that can enhance your control over what aspects of the program are available to the users in your company. And with that, I thank you all for joining the discussion today, and I hope you attend another of our free webinars in the near future. Take care and have a great day.